everyone. Good evening. Happy Monday. Welcome to this artist talk for the 19th annual member show at the AGSM. The AGSM is located in Brandon, Manitoba, which is on Treaty 2 territory, the traditionally shared lands of the Cree, the OG Cree, the Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples. It's also the homeland of the Métis Nation. The member show is consistently and generously sponsored by the Whitehead Foundation. We give them our continued thanks. Everybody who's joining us online right now, you are welcome and encouraged to communicate with us, to engage with us via the comments section on your Facebook or YouTube channel, wherever you're joining us from. So that is all of that. I would like to not waste any more time and bring up our AGSM artist members who are going to be sharing a little bit about their work in general and the work that they have up on display in the main gallery right now. So first we say hello to Chris Reid.
Hello.
Hello. Errin Witherspoon.
Hi.
Hi. And Jayce Paul.
Hi.
So we're going to leave everybody on screen the whole time. We can have a chat, and I really do encourage everybody watching from home to interrupt whenever you have a question or a comment to share with us. So let's just get right to it. We'll start with Chris Reid. If you would tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I've been living in Brandon since 2000. I am a practicing artist, but in order to support my arts career, I've also had to work, and I've been employed in the social services sector. So right now I'm semi-retired, working part-time for the Community Health and Housing Association, and then I teach whenever I can. So I've taught sessionally at Brandon University as well as at the Art Gallery, and wherever else, I can get workshops, etc. In terms of my artwork, a lot of it has to do with insecurity and anxiety at some level. The work I have in this show is not what I usually pursue. I'm kind of in the middle of trying to figure out where I'm going with my work. I've been doing a lot of work around homelessness and housing, but all of it has to do with that concept, the idea of home. These three pieces in the members show were the result of, well, like I had mentioned, to back up a little bit, I just needed a change from what I was working on. And then working in my garden this year, I had a lot of raspberries, and these are basically, well, they're based off of raspberries, and I was just getting really frustrated. So they're a mixture of acrylic and watercolor crayons on paper, and it's a reaction to having to deal with raspberries every day for several weeks. And also, like I mentioned, well, with my previous work, I've had characters that one character that's been an avatar for myself and another one for my husband. And then I'll often I'll make references to Slavic heritage with chicken legs on various structures, which would be like Baba Yaga's house. So I'm trying to figure out a new set of characters. So, I'm starting to look at other Slavic tales and but at the same time as I'm looking for these Slavic references, I'm just trying to figure out how I can abstract or change forms that I find around me into a character, how I can use that form as the basis and make it metamorphize, is that the right word? Into something else. So the color palette in these pieces, I generally work very bright. because I was using watercolor crayon as the start, and normally I work with acrylics, it's not my normal palette. So that's another thing that's kind of different about this in terms of how I usually work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
So
watercolor crayon allowed you to get these fabulous effects. Like, let me zoom in here. Like this drip and this transparency for
yeah,
highlights.
yeah. And some of the bleeds,
Yeah.
like if you look at the edges of the leaves, there's like some bleeding into the paper, or even bleeding into each other. That the colors on the leaves, yeah, they're kind of they bleed. I wouldn't be getting that with the acrylics.
Right. So they all do have really different characters, right? So I joke that these just seem very sexual to me. And these are more kind of pranksters, and
Yeah,
these are um, I don't know, piranhas. It's like they're just kind of eating machines, little Pac-Men or something, right? They're driven by
yeah,
kind of a instinct. Um,
yeah.
yeah, so that's interesting about the looking for new characters. So is this something that you think will this inform the other stuff? Like,
It'll inform because you know, when I'm looking at characters, because the other thing is I've started to delve into animation, and the idea of something that you can draw repeatedly, that you can make move, that has a strong silhouette. Um, that's not something that I've really dealt with before. So it's a whole bunch of parameters that I haven't considered, and that in and of itself, I'm finding it very difficult. Um, it's either too cutesy or too ugly, or it, it's 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 not where I want it to be yet.
well, it's interesting. I don't think that I've seen you animate the baker's daughter, the cat face man, who are the avatars for you and your husband from from your bigger work, and they're very. You could do those in your sleep.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I've been doing them for like, close to 20 years. And so then when you decide that you're going to break out and add a whole stable of characters, a whole new cast, um, I guess it's kind of like making a casting call or something. So I have to reconstruct these. Um, if it, you know, and like part of the reason, I don't know, I'm going to try putting together something for Nuit Blanche. And so I'm trying my hand at making plasticine figures. So yeah, it needs a lot of work.
So is this about um, the need to branch out? Is that an obligation that you forced on yourself, or is it that your actual artistic motivation is getting stale?
Is getting what?
It,
Stale?
yeah.
Um, mm, Oddly enough, it's not that it's getting stale, it's that I'm feeling that I have to downsize. And so I have to find ways that I can, when you're someone who produces large objects and the large objects start to accumulate, and it's like, do you throw it out, or do you keep putting it into your physical space? Um, I mean, I'm closer to the end of my career than I am to the beginning. Um, so what do you do with all of this stuff after you've been creating for, like Kurt mentioned that he'd been creating for over 40 years or something like that, right? So what do you do with all of these things that may or may not have some kind of value? So one of the reasons that I started to go to animation is because you can create something small that doesn't take up a physical space, but you can project it large. So that's come up with a lot of practical problems, a huge learning curve. Um, and it's really, I feel a lot like I've started from day one again. And part of the issues I'm having right now is I have an idea of what I can produce if I continue making large paintings or large scale two-dimensional works. But that's not going to serve my purposes or the practicality of my life going forward.
Right.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. Just literally storage space. But I know that you are continuing to pursue your interest in Slavic folklore.
Yeah.
And I know that that you gravitate towards the spooky ones.
Yeah.
Lots of villains, right?
Yes.
I love the idea of you're reflecting on yourself during this kind of idyllic domestic task of tending to your bountiful berries in your summer garden and deciding that they're just really out to get you.
Yeah.
So I think that there's definitely a drive to just constantly learn new things, right? Including even just expanding and focusing your Slavic folklore interest, and experimenting with those mediums, down to the minutia of playing with watercolor pencil.
Yeah. Well, one of the things when I met you early on, and we were like when I first met you, and we were working on the putting together my work for the show on homelessness, you had remarked that you had said something about thinking that my work in the social service sector and my arts practice, how do I bring the two together? And then you said that I don't. Like I don't see a division between the two.
Yeah.
And that's really got me to thinking. So that's another thing that's come into after you said that. I was like, yeah, I don't really separate. I don't see the job or doing housework or anything else in my life as separate from my artistic practice. It's kind of like it informs each other, and I bring some of the things that I do in my paintings in terms of concept, in terms of approach, organizing, pushing an idea through into the other sectors of my life, down to writing policy,
Right.
which is like really kind of weird. But
I think, I mean, that's how you continue to be a prolific practicing artist, despite the fact that you always have to have another job, that you always have to be teaching, you have to be doing dishes.
Yeah.
It's not even about the discipline of getting into the studio, it's about never really leaving it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So thank you. Errin, I saw you nodding when Chris talked about painting big. If I remember correctly, last year you could only submit one piece because you're only allowed 5 running feet. And so you gave us something quite large.
Yeah.
And this year you were able to give us 3 smaller things. Do you want to comment on working large and working small?
Oh, wow. The way I'm working now, I don't know that I would enjoy it as much doing it large, because I'm working more with mixed media now, incorporating papers and fabrics and stuff into it. And I think I have been tempted to try doing it large. I'm not going to lie. I have some canvases that are sitting around that could be used for that, but I'm still just playing with the mixed media, and so not quite comfortable going big again yet. But with what I'm doing, definitely going small has been the most sensible thing to do, I guess.
Right, because you're working at the scale of the prints on this
Yeah.
fabric. Why don't you tell us about your process for these?
So if you remember, most of what people have seen of mine is portraiture. And I've applied the exact same technique that I used in painting the portraits to this still life painting of a vase of flowers sitting on a table. I covered the entire canvas with fabric, and I intentionally chose this very busy botanical fabric because I wanted to really, I guess, contrast the monochromatic tones in the flowers. I desaturated the flowers, took all the color out of the flowers, and you pointed out at the lunch and look, you spotted that bird of paradise in this arrangement right away. And so yes, when this image was in color, it was very vibrant. So I intentionally sucked all of the color out of the flowers, and I wanted to put it into the background. So I gave myself that really busy fabric in the back, and some really fun, a little bit quieter prints with the paper strips that I used to make the table. And then just painted the flowers in monochrome, plain old grayscale.
How did you keep the texture of all of these different collage elements from coming through?
And I didn't.
I didn't notice. So it seems like especially this close up right now would have a lot of seams.
It does.
Okay.
Yep, it does. I chose my paper intentionally with patterns that ran horizontally across the page. Mm-hmm. So when I laid them down, I could butt them up I didn't have to overlap them a whole lot. Okay. So, yeah.
So it was very meticulous. And also there is that little bit of perspective that reminds us of a Matisse interior, maybe, right? That kind of almost bent, almost forced, and then instead flattened,
Yeah. So yeah, and the reason I started working, I mentioned this at Lunch and Look as well, but the reason that I started working with fabrics, and I didn't realize this when I started doing it, it wasn't until after I had done a few pieces using fabric as the background that I realized why I was doing it. And that is my mom went through some health challenges this year, is still going through them. And it's been a tumultuous time for the whole family. And I found myself yearning for closeness with her, but yet not able to be with her all of the time. So I lean to fabric, I think, because that's where my relationship with her was really built as a child. She was always at the sewing machine. She's a quilter, and has always had, I grew up in a pile of fabric. So going back to that in my work was a way I think that just helped me feel closer to her.
Yeah. Because you could have done this with collage techniques, with wallpaper, in order to get the same kind of busyness, but instead there's a warmth to fiber.
Mm-hmm. I could have gone back to abstraction because that's kind of where I came to the canvas from sketchbooks and mental health journals. So yeah, I did do some abstract work earlier on, and I could have gone back into that, but this is, I'm certain that that's why I did this. And it's been so much fun, honestly, like fun in the fabric store, fun in the thrift store. I thrift as much of my fabric as I possibly can. Just go and look at the bed sheets, look at all of the shirts, all of the dresses, and just pick up anything that kind of sparks my fancy or grabs my attention.
Yeah. Side note. I got the tackiest, like tropical, hibiscus-y green bed sheet from Value Village because my couch was shabby. So I just made a really big pillowcase out of this tacky stuff on an old Victorian couch that sadly did not make the move to Manitoba. Oh. But when we were packing up, we were watching Golden Girls, and they had exactly the same fabric on their kitchen table. Exactly. It's the dream. It's the dream.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
There's so much cool stuff to be found when you're.
There is, right? Okay, so you did mention that portraits are kind of something that you're more known for, that's part of your kind of more historical practice. Just to give everybody a sense of scale, so you have these two small ones that almost feel like they belong on a family portrait wall, based on their scale versus the other ones, right?
Yeah.
And again with the fabric.
Yeah, same thing. Covered the entire, I think this one's a wood panel. I covered the entire panel with the flamingo fabric, and then I paint the image over top of the fabric. And this one I think is using 6 values of gray.
And what's your technique for, so you do a Photoshop and then a transfer?
Yeah, it starts in Photoshop. So I take an image and I reduce it to, it depends on the scale of the piece itself, but it's either between 5 and 7 values, and print that out, and I use it like a roadmap, and I transfer the large chunks onto in this case, onto the fabric, and then paint them just like, almost like a paint by number that I've made myself. And then I go in afterwards and add finer details. And
as you can see with the frizz here, I also really love this close up because you can see a little bit of that pink poking through. It's kind of a stubborn pink, right? And those little bits of hair detail, I think, are so important here. So did the fabric come first, or the content, the portrait?
The portrait for this one, definitely. I was just looking through copyright-free image websites to find just anybody who kind of jumped off the screen at me, and she certainly did. She jumped off the screen. I wanted to do those curls so badly. So I found her first, and then I literally just put whatever I could find onto the canvas behind there. And that is actually the same fabric that you see in the arrangement on a table painting.
Right. Yeah. It looks so much more simplified, so much more minimal because of this intervention on top. Yeah,
absolutely.
Lovely insight from Farazanda here, that fabric is a metaphor for a sense of touch, feel, and the closeness of skin. Absolutely, that warmth.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you, Farazanda. Yeah, I agree.
And the treatment, I think your technique where you have your system down so that you can step back and trust the process. These two portraits held up next to each other, you can really see how the effects are different, right? When you trust that process. This one has a lot more kind of vibration. I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but as opposed to this one, which has a lot of stillness. Yeah. Despite all of this frenetic mark making, it's studio lighting that you've achieved, right?
Yeah.
Instead of a snapshot.
Thank you.
Because of that wonderful transition about working big, I didn't ask you to tell us about yourself. Do you want to give us a background? Anything that you haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, sure. I did mention a little bit in my talk just now, but I came to art through therapy. So I started drawing and doodling, pardon me, in my mental health journals. Coming up on 5 years ago now. I lose track of the time. I had been creative as a child, growing up with a mother who liked to create as much as mine did, and a father who also did had his own art practice, was around me all the time. So I was creative as a child. I really squashed that creativity once I hit adulthood, though, and turned to my more logical brain, doing all the right things that we're all supposed to do as adults, coming out of school and taking care of business. And then in therapy, when asked to journal my thoughts, I found that very threatening and frightening. So I would doodle. I promised my therapist I would spend time with the journals. So I did. I would set a timer and I would open my journal and I would just doodle because I couldn't write words. And she started noticing some similarities in what I was doodling that, had come up before on days when I was experiencing similar feelings. So she really encouraged me to keep going. And then it leapt out of the journals and eventually onto canvas. And so, I've been painting for just coming up in 4 years, and started with more abstract paintings. And then I found this technique, which was born out of a need for me to feed my curiosity about the human face and humans. I really wanted to learn how to paint people. But because of the nature of my mental illness, which was an eating disorder, I had to find a way to stare at a picture of a person and try to recreate that without painting or drawing eyes and noses and mouths, because part of the way that my brain worked, that is just led to comparison or perfection, having to fix this one little blemish, because that's not how a face is supposed to look, right? So I needed to dump all of that, and this technique of stripping everything back down to just a few values and just painting chunks of color really let me, like you said, I can step in close and paint the chunks of color and not think about what I'm painting, and then step back and you see the actual image comes into focus.
Yeah.
And
you do share this technique. I think you do workshops and paint nights. You've just started?
I started doing that. I've been having so much fun. People have been painting their pets, and it is so much fun. So much fun.
Yeah. That's great. I think sharing, because the concepts, right, and the backgrounds are where the art lies, and giving the tools to people to create their own. I think Chris would agree as a teacher as well. It's all about making sure that the brain can project through the hands, right? Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay. Gonna move over here. This is, I was saying before we went live that I didn't curate any of these talks with people, but I'm realizing now this is the color and the whimsy group, right? So these are 3 drawings that I just found out were from Inktober by Jayce. Before we go into these, Jayce, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. Hi, my name's Jayce. I participate every year in Inktober. These 3 drawings are from this year's Inktober. Yeah, so the prompts were wonder, path, and toad. Yep.
We have another Inktober toad in the members show by Becky Chin. I love toads. I don't know. Turns out I love drawn toads, inky toads. Yeah. So why don't you tell us what Inktober is first, just in case people aren't familiar?
So you do a drawing every day in the month of October in ink, and they give you prompts for every day. Yep.
Okay. So let's look at wander first.
Yeah, so I want to put this one in because this is my favorite drawing from Inktober.
Why is it your favorite?
Because I like just how it's like I want to like portray like as a ghost wandering. I don't know, I just like that idea, I guess. And
how do you start with your with your ideas, right? There's all of these different layers and all of these abstractions, like so this kind of tarp that stretches through, right?
Yeah, so when I see the prompt, I just like visualize like an idea, and then so I start drawing it. I use pencil first, and then if I like it, then I go over it with the like ink pen, and then I color it with the marker.
So you're just taking the prompt and kind of shutting your eyes and letting your brain just be weird?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. So the idea
I like the way the 2 figures in the foreground, it flip-flops between, because it's a flat space, essentially, it flip-flops between them holding up the brown shape on their heads and being the road behind them. Yeah. So, and having that road behind them in that kind of wave really contributes to a sense of movement in that image, which could be quite stagnant in the foreground otherwise. you know, and it also unites it with all of the flowing elements in the sky. So I really like the way you've connected those flowing sky elements to the road and then integrated those figures into it. So I think that really works nicely.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, the screen part here, like, I had the idea of maybe like the ghost like shifting through, but then I just put it all together in one, and I just colored it like a single color. And yeah, I like the colors I used here. For this guy though, like I wanted to use a different color, but I thought the purple would go better with the bottom half. So yeah.
Yeah, there's something just really intensely graphic about it in the first place, but then um, we were saying before, like this is just a really striking image because of I think, yeah, as Chris was saying, more the undulations, right? This connectivity, this disconnectedness between all of these figures. You can't tell if it's a march or if it's chronological, right? If it's the same figure moving away. And because of these really saturated and really kind of uncanny color choices, it really reminds me of the glow of a bright, dark night, right? How things become kind of fluorescent in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 2. What was the prompt for this one?
So this one was path, and yeah, I kind of just wanted to do like something silly. So I was thinking, oh, like maybe a path through fruit. So yeah, I just picked some fruit and made a path through them. Yeah.
And the really interesting choice for me with this one is how you've created floating homes with stepladders going up to all of them. What inspired that?
So actually these are like I didn't think of them as step ladders. I think I thought them more as like maybe just like you know how there's like a cement path going to like your
Okay.
door. So yeah, that's what I was thinking of
That
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 they
apple
were.
makes me think of bobbing for apples. Like it seems to me that it's floating in water.
The apple in particular, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's supposed to be water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this has a lot more, instead of that flat color that we saw in Wander, a lot more layering of colors. What are the markers that you use for color?
So I used the Ohuhu markers. Yeah, I think that's
Those are
yeah.
alcohol ink, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I like these ones because I feel like I can kind of like blend them more, and they're more affordable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm,
It stains, which is a bad thing and a good thing, depending on where it's staining, right?
mhm.
And that's so interesting. I really pictured them all kind of being tethered to these ladders going up, and now I realize that it's actually recalling that same thing that we were so interested in Wander of playing with the perspective, right? Of kind of distorting things so that you're looking up and down at the same time at these things. So we'll just look at the third one as well. Toad.
Yeah. So yeah, this is Prince Louis. When I seen the prompt toad, I immediately thought of him, and so when I was done drawing him, like I put in as like Prince Louis, he's like a snob. So that's why I was very particular about the title, like with the lowercase l, because I was thinking like, oh, like Prince Louis, he's not like as important as he thinks he is. So that's why, yeah, I put that. And yeah,
And he doesn't move very fast apparently because he has mushrooms growing on him.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
We have a
yes.
question for you from Melanie.
Oh, sure.
If you find that completing Inktober projects every year impacts your work in other mediums.
Um, uh, maybe, I guess. I don't know. I don't really use other mediums really. I usually just use ink and yeah.
And
Yeah.
outside of October, what kind of content are you producing?
Um I just mostly just draw like, I guess, portraits. But I still use just ink and pencil or pen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And are you practicing every day,
Uh,
constantly, or is Inktober a
o-
time when you're really making a lot?
occasionally, yeah, I draw. But it's not as much as Inktober. Um, but yeah, I think maybe doing Inktober every year helps me become like a better artist, I guess, because it just gives me an idea or experience, I guess, with putting my ideas out there, and
Yeah.
drawing. Yeah.
I think the through line for this one is that idea of prompts, right? Is the idea of being struck uh, by a material. Um, I'm trying to think of how to phrase. So we have obviously, Errin, you're inspired by this idea of cloth, but also specifically the rejection of facial features, right? The rejection of the process of recognition,
Mm-hmm.
and then yeah, at its core, Chris's work um, about just trying to populate, a world with things that are alive and want to hurt you.
And what it hurt me, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I said it dealt with anxiety, right?
yeah, yeah. So, what do we think about um, a question to pose to all of you about um, if we like these assignments, if the assignments have to be um, self-motivated or if they can be externally motivated. This idea of unlocking potential by allowing parameters to be put on your practice or insisting that parameters get put on your practice.
That's interesting.
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking.
I'm asking about this through line between the three of you about the way that you search for prompts or latch onto prompts in order to keep yourself going, to keep yourself maybe fresh, as opposed to the full openness. You've all kind of given yourself assignments. How am I going to work through, this this desire to move on to the next thing? How am I going to work through this emotion? How am I going to work through this day in an artistic way?
Mm-hmm. For me, I think it's just it comes back to the knowledge. Like, I know that I have to be creative. If I don't bring myself into my studio every day and create something, whether that be a painting or whether that be a mess, if I don't do it, my mental health will suffer. And I know that. So I come here for myself. And I guess the structure that I've put on my work is a protection, a way for me to protect myself from myself while I'm creating. If that makes sense.
Sure. And then the sharing. So when you're doing abstraction, for example, you don't have to worry about that protection, and that's about making the mess. That's about just being there, just showing up the same way that people have to do cardio for their mental health or go outside for their mental health. This is what you're saying?
Kind of, yes. But with abstraction, what I have found is I can be more open. I can let the ideas come out of me and go onto the canvas because I know that they're going to get covered up with layers of whatever later. So, for example, when I was doing more abstract work and working more in mixed media previously, I had all kinds of things that I had saved throughout my life, just my pack rat tendencies, like brochures from places and things that I had experienced, or all kinds of tidbits of I'm trying to think of what the word is for, like, when you go to a play and you get the
right.
Yeah. So I had kept all of this stuff, and it was from periods of my life that were not necessarily enjoyable. And so I started ripping and tearing and cutting those things up and putting them into my artwork, and then I covered it. So it was like like giving away all of those bad experiences in my art, but people didn't know it was there.
Right. You shared tulips with us 2 years ago, I think, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting. We have a question for Jayce from Farizonda
Okay.
about the frog. Tell us who Prince Louis is.
Oh, it's not from any book. It's just something I just thought of. I just drew a toad with a crown on. Yeah. And then I named him Prince Louis.
Is it Louis for the French for him?
Um,
Or Louis steadfast, like Louis the 14th?
I'm not sure. I just like the name Louis for him, so I just chose Louis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of putting, oh,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
In terms of putting structure or parameters on the work, I think for me, it's sometimes I feel like the work is very directed by the situation. So in these pieces, it happens to be subject matter, but I've always got an urge to make something. I'm an obsessive doodler. Like when I'm taking notes in a meeting or when I took classes, there would always be more drawings than there are actual notes in whatever I was writing. So then the work sometimes gets directed by what's going on in my life. Those parameters come as natural. For example, when my kids were smaller and we were also living in a smaller house, I had restricted space. And I had restricted space seems to be a big issue for me, but restricted space and a lot of mismatched socks. So I made sock animals, right? And it's often, like Jayce is talking about the cost of materials and being restricted at this point to using markers. That is going to give a specific look to her work that is something that I can't achieve at this point. So there's a certain amount of, I think sometimes when we're limited, we have to be more creative and more personally creative. And, I find that that's when I find out, it's usually when I find out that people are limited by something. There's something in their work that I become incredibly jealous of not being able to achieve.
Jealousy, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's true, the different textures that are achieved by that limited supply list.
Exactly.
And also with you, you do like color, but there's something that I call Chris Reid pink, and it turns out that's because you got an enormous amount of like pink latex for really cheap, and you just used it a lot.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now it shows up all the time.
Yeah, and I've actually run out of that latex, so now I have to figure out ways to reproduce the latex that I no longer own.
Yeah. You branded yourself by accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I guess the same as Errin. Like I like to draw, and then for like my mental health, and it helps me like de-stress, I guess. Yeah, so mostly I just doodle a lot. Yeah, growing up, like I was always into art, but I never really considered myself as an artist until I got to like I guess Brandon University, and I took a drawing class, and then I was like, hey, I'm actually pretty okay at this. So yeah, and then I just slowly growing my confidence every year, Thanktober.
Yeah, good. So I mean, it happens so often that there are studies on it, academic studies about the moment when children stop thinking of themselves as an artist where every child is an artist. And then at some point, they go through this kind of existential awakening where they go, I'm not an artist because, you know, my big sister is the same way. Oh, I'm not the softball player because this person plays better than I do. So I have to find my, you know, and everybody's become one single identity. And I think even if you don't pursue it as your priority career, as your single creative outlet, it's a very, very fortunate thing to be able to keep it going, even in small part, through those years, right? Through people who have continued to doodle in their margins the whole time. You know, people who, you know, joined stage crew just to paint, you know, big flats. It's a real privilege. Otherwise, you have to, you know, go through stuff before you get drawing again.
That's very true. I also find it very interesting how you'll see a lot of the time once kids get out of middle school, they tend to, if they were artistic, they tend to struggle to hang on to that. And I think that has a lot to do with our capitalism in our society and how, you know, the art isn't seen as a career path. Art is seen as something frivolous and extra that you do in your spare time if you've made enough money at your real job, right?
Right.
So.
And also, this was certainly true in my school system, where we had, you know, we went to one school through 6th grade and then one school through 8th grade and then high school. And if you don't get caught by the right teacher, by the right crowd, every time you move into a new school, if you don't get caught into that basket, then you get lost, right? I mean, yeah, it didn't happen with me in art, but it definitely happened with me in sports, right? Mm-hmm. Didn't survive the transition. It happens to a lot of people in writing and, you know, all of these different hobbies. You need to be caught every step of the way. Yeah, including into adulthood. But this is why we love the member show so much, because we have, just professional working artists, and we have people who love making art, right? All up against, and there is no way to tell from the art that's on the wall, you know, who is who, because everybody's an artist once you're in the gallery, right? That's the great privilege of being able to put on exhibitions like this.
I just wanted to comment on Chris's pieces before we go too, if that's okay. The common thing I see, aside from the raspberries and the characters in these pieces, that really jumped out at me when I saw them in the show, is they gave me this feeling of like reaching for connection. And I think it's in all of these long extended lines that seem invisible almost, coming off of the backs of the characters.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I used to like to draw telephone poles and telephone lines, simply because of that idea of connecting. Mm-hmm. I kind of miss the fact that telephone lines are going to be something that's going to be disappearing as time goes by, because it was this physical manifestation of connecting people to others. So, yeah, I think that's sort of something underlying. Thanks for pointing that out.
You had said that you have always been interested in the kind of out of place or displaced.
I'm sorry, how what is placed?
You've always been interested in the out of place or displaced.
Yes, yeah.
Likely because you were displaced yourself.
Yeah.
I think specifically because of these drips causing those lines. Also, mm-hmm. Right? There's the trace of the motion of the forces of gravity, right? Of all mm-hmm. of those things that are. It's as though they don't have any control over where they're flying to, right? Yeah. Any more comments? I can always talk forever, but that means that I can take over for way too long. Did I ask you, Errin, speaking of people veering off, did you mention why you suddenly just wanted to do a still life here?
No, I didn't. I just thought it would be fun to try.
It would be fun to try.
Yeah.
Because it's a totally different art historical kind of tradition than what you've been working on before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just something that I thought, well, I never thought I could paint people before, and now I can paint people, so maybe I can paint still life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Because like I made the Matisse reference already to this still life, but also all the way back to the kind of the Dutch and Italian florals with all of this life in front of it, and then the deadening, the effects of kind of deadening it with the monochromatics. Yeah. Note from Farazanda for Keith, for Chris.
Oh.
The characters are talking to her.
I hope they're being nice.
They're not being nice. They're trying to say something. Yeah, I do think they're so funny. Oh, because raspberry bushes are prickly.
They have teeth.
Yeah.
True.
And these ones in the middle, are those ever going to become good raspberries, or are they going to stay those little hard things that you can't even pull off? I don't know.
I don't know.
What did you do with all of them?
With all of the raspberries?
Yeah.
Actually, I actually for the first year in many, many years managed to freeze some.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, I still have raspberries.
Maybe that's what they're trying to tell Forzanda. They're cold.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you were trying to build up your blueberry collection, right? And then the raspberries took over.
Yeah, well, Saskatoons and blueberries just died on me. So
They just died on you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I seem to remember going plant shopping and you were looking for a mate for your solo blueberry because it wasn't well enough.
Yeah, and unfortunately they didn't make it.
Yeah. It's a shame.
Really,
I mean, it is Manitoba though.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they shouldn't. Okay, we're coming up on the 55-minute mark, so I want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask any questions that they have left. Same goes for everybody in the audience. Thanks to Farazanda and Melanie for asking questions as well between the three of you. No? Okay. So if we are done, then we will call it a night. Thank you all. Oh, I didn't wait long enough.
How long does it take
to make your art when you're inspired? Oh, or when do you get inspired? Let's go with Chris first because your pieces are up right here.
Yeah. It's hard to say how long it takes to make it. And inspiration, I make a habit of doing something art related every day. So it's sometimes unfortunately it's paperwork. Other times I get to be in the studio, but I make sure that I am there has to be something art related every single day, and I try to make that studio time. So inspiration will be there, or if it's not inspiration, there's times when you're making an artwork where there's just parts of it that are just downright boring. And there's that part where it is just filling in an area or just preparing the surface. There is that, part of making art that isn't all about being inspired. There's that part of prepping or finishing, or even if it's cleaning your studio. Or
grant writing.
Yeah. So, inspiration and that's basically it for me.
But so as far as length, one of these drawings is obviously much smaller than your paintings, but it's also done with pencils.
Yeah, I don't know, 4 to 8 hours, depending on what was going on with that. Yeah.
And you just sit down and do it, or 48 hours cut up?
Cut up.
Yeah.
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 So that's for each one. It's not 4 to 8 hours for all three.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Who's next? Let's go to Errin.
Oh boy. Yeah, it really depends on the size of the piece that I'm painting, the subject matter. Obviously, the arrangement on a table took me longer than it would have taken me to do the same kind of treatment with the same techniques and do a portrait, just because I've practiced the portraiture so much more. So this one took me longer, and it's also bigger than the other ones that are in the show. So for that reason, it also took me longer. And this technique of applying the fabric and then applying the papers, and it's a lot more time consuming than what I had been doing, which was just a solid color background with all of my portraits. So yeah, so these ones are taking a lot longer, but it's new and it's fresh, and there's always some excitement with that, with new and fresh ideas and curiosity and playing around with new materials. So it doesn't feel like it takes longer. It goes by very quickly when you're playing and having a good time. So yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to put a time on them. Do you count the time it takes for you to wait for the glue to dry? Like, does that all count, or is it only in the application? Because part of the practice is the patience too.
For sure. And deciding what you want to be perfectionist about and what you want to let go.
Yeah.
You want a chance to take over.
Absolutely.
So that idea of like the having fun and playing around, would that be your answer to the question about inspiration?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Inspiration. In this case, when I'm shopping for fabrics, I'm getting inspired. I might see a bed sheet and go, oh, that would make a really cool basket, or that would make, so inspiration comes from pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, Jayce, same question. So these all have to take a day, but that doesn't mean that they can't take 24 hours.
Yeah, so I guess minimum 3 hours. Yeah, that's thinking of the idea and then just I guess doing the work. Yeah.
And you said that sometimes you have a first draft that you kind of toss away and start again. If
Yeah, sometimes I decide I don't like it, so I'll just redraw something. But minimum probably 3 hours. It could take longer. Yeah.
And do you sit and do it in one go?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I spend like 3 hours a day on Inktober drawings every day in October.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's hard on the shoulders.
Yeah, sometimes though, like I have like I guess artist block or I can't think of anything, so I just put it off and then I do it in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Oh, that's a good practice. So you have a chance if
Mm-hmm.
it's not happening right then. Do you have so inspiration can be really practical, and it can also be really ineffable. So we were talking about you just like not feeling it, and then in the evening suddenly you go, I'm going to give this another go. Is that because your brain has opened, or because you force yourself to sit?
I guess maybe yeah, I just force myself to like sit down at my desk and I guess just think of things. Or maybe I ask someone for if like, hey, can you like maybe giving me an idea? And then I just go off of their idea and I think of something.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It was a theme of the last artist talk that we did for the member show, was this idea of acceptance. And I think so much of that is accepting that they're not all going to be great, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And there's a messy middle to every piece. Like there comes a point in every piece where you just look at it and go, oh, this is not working. But you have to just keep going.
Yeah. I think that's a great note to end on. Keep going. Messy middle.
Yeah.
For the middle artist talk.
We're the messy middle.
So thank you all so much, and to everybody at home watching. This has been really fun. We have our third and final artist talk on Friday the 15th at 1 right here on the YouTube and the Facebook. And the member show is up in the main gallery until December 16th. You can also see the lunch and look on our YouTube because that was recorded live with a little bit of sound problems, but you can at least get a walk around the gallery. So do join us all there. Errin, Chris, Jayce, thank you so much. Once again, Susan Griffin, Errin loves your work.
Oh, thank you, Susan.
Okay, so thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.